Yo, YouTube, what is good? It's Aeghis. I know a lot of you guys are freaking out right now. Crazy mage changes coming in, right, guys? Basically, just to get right into the video, what we're going to be discussing is what is going on with mages in this upcoming patch. We'll go over some of the buffs here. So we have Fire Mage. These are the PvE changes that will affect PvP. Every change in this category here will affect PvP unless stated otherwise, such as these ones do not apply to PvP combat. So we got the Fire Mage changes. Flame Strike damage increase 15%. Phoenix Flames increase 20%. Living Bomb increase 10%. So obviously those are all buffs to Fire Mage. Now these are all AoE abilities because PvE buffs typically kind of are, I suppose. But these changes do help fire. This will help the Flame Strike build. I'm not sure if we'll be potentially running the Flame Strike build. So just to start the video off with the Fire Mage side of things, I do think the Flame Strike build will probably be pretty solid. There's a lot of talents that were changed as well a long time ago, or not that long ago, but a lot of the Fire Mage talents now affect Flame Strike. So if you guys aren't aware of what that build looks like, I'll show it to you here in a second after we go down and look at the other Fire Mage changes. You can see here Fireball damage increased by 100. In PvP combat was 35%. And then GPI cast time reduced to 4 seconds was 4.5, but now it deals 30% of the target's maximum health was 35. So real quick, I want to talk about what perspective Blizzard is coming at these changes with. These changes won't make a whole lot of sense to you until you realize that these changes are BG Blitz oriented. A long time ago when Blizzard announced BG Blitz, they said they would be tuning PvP around it. I'm not sure where that article is nowadays, but I do remember reading that way back whenever they announced it and whenever they were announcing the War Within. So it makes more sense when you view patch notes nowadays if you read them from a perspective of Battleground Blitz as the main game mode, which is what they said they would be doing. So the changes towards Greater Pyroblast makes sense when you view it in that light, because GPI is not typically really a played talent so much in arenas. If we scroll back to the changes here, you'll see that we have GPI, like I said, and then in the Fireball damage increase. So what that refers to is, one thing I want to make clear here is that the buffs to like Frostbolt and Fireball are not affecting talents that replace these abilities. So Fireball and Frostbolt buffs will not be affecting Frost Firebolt. These are separately tuned. This just means that whenever you are playing Fireball, the damage is increased by 100 instead of 35. So what this buff essentially means is that for Sun Fury Fire, Fireball's damage is increased, because when you play Frost Fire as fire, that Fireball is getting replaced. So you can essentially view this one as a Sun Fury buff, which I don't mind because Sun Fury is the weaker tree at the moment. I think they're trying to make Fireball hit nearly as hard as Frostfire Bolt to give Sun Fury a potential shot at being viable. I'm not sure this will actually happen because you don't have those instant procs for Fireball like you do for Frostfire Bolt. Plus Frostfire Bolt I think will still hit a lot harder, and Flame Accelerant is nerfed in PvP, so the fast cast Fireball will still be less productive than running Frostfire. As for these buffs up here, the Flame Strike build could potentially be coming back. If you guys don't know what the Flame Strike build is, it's essentially where Flame Strike is your main damaging ability instead of Pyroblast. And that build is going to look something like this. We have the Flame Strike build here. Oh, never mind. It's the Living Bomb build. I believe this one here. So we have the LB build, Living Bomb. Essentially a lot of the right side talent tree, Fire Mage tree. I'm not sure if this will be the build we're playing. I'm saying this is the build that was being played when Flame Strike was the better option here. A lot of these talents will be oriented towards Flame Strike and Living Bomb. Now, I'm not sure the Living Bomb changes actually a lot because it's 10%, and right now Living Bomb is not hitting for very much at all. So even if I just do like a little baby damage rotation here, just to kind of like illustrate, keep in mind these are on target dummies, so these people have no versatility, so abilities are going to hit a little bit harder on these things. So I just want to get enough damage in there so that we can kind of see what's going on and what abilities might hit for here in the future. So boom, that's a decent enough rotation. So you can see Flame Strike right now hitting for 700,000 on a PvP dummy. In Arena, I've never really seen this hit above around 450,000. You can see Living Bomb's hitting for 100,000. Again, in Arena, I've never really seen this hitting for more than, I don't know, maybe 40 to 50,000. Because you got to keep in mind, players have 30% or like 25-ish% versatility. Maybe the Living Bomb build will be coming back. Sorry, the Flame Strike build. We'll have to see on that. We're not 100% sure, but it could be potentially coming back. I would like to see a different direction taken on Fire Mage. I would like to see Pyroblast buffed, but hey, we'll have to see what happens to Fire Mage, guys. All right, guys, now we have the Frost Mage changes here. So there were a couple up here in the PvE section. However, they have the do not apply to PvP combat. So that would be the 20% on Glacial and the 20% on Ray. I do think this is a mistake to not apply these to PvP because these spells do need help in PvP. And with the nerfs that we have down below, it would make sense for compensation to be in the casted damage area, i.e. Ray and Glacial, both casted spells, one channeled, obviously. I do hope that they go back on this, does not apply to PvP, or at least buff them in the near future, because these spells are fun and it's fun when they actually do damage. Right now we're not even playing either of these. If we scroll down here, we'll see the actual PvP changes. We've already been over the fire ones, so if we look here, we'll basically focus on anything that's affecting the Frost Mage side of things right now. So we have Frostfire bolt damage increased by 100% in PvP was 75, so this is a 25% buff to Frostfire bolt's base damage. But then if you read the line below it, we have Frostfire empowerment increases Frostfire bolt damage by 30% was 50. Essentially what this means is that Frostfire bolt will be doing 25% more baseline instead of this proc here, basically the instant Frostfire proc. Instead of doing 50% increased damage, now it'll do 30% increased damage. But I do believe this comes out to be a small buff, in my opinion, because I'm not some crazy math wizard. Maybe someone in the comments or the chat knows better than me, but this going from a 75% increase to a 100% increase, and then this going from a 50% increase to a 20% increase, it sounds like I said, I'm not 100% sure, but even if the base damage is being increased and the proc is less, it's still, by the numbers, is 5% more baseline increase. So I don't know if that actually equates to a 5% buff or what, but I think it does more damage. Like I said, not 100% sure. Basically, this doesn't really change anything. And then we scroll down here, we see the Frost changes. These are the big ones. Ice Lance damage further nerfed down to 25% increase in PvP was 45. So this is another 20% taken off of Lance. This isn't a flat 20%, right? It comes out, I'm not sure exactly. Essentially, Ice Lance has a base modifier of it does 100% effectiveness in PvP, and then it got boosted by 45%, so it was like it did 145% of its normal damage or whatever in PvP, 45% more. Now it does 25% more in PvP. Definitely a kind of a big nerf when you take into consideration the nerf before this as well. This will hurt the instant cast build. I do think the instant cast build will still be strong. I'm not sure if we'll end up moving more towards a Frostbolt build where Frostbolt damage increased by 150. It was 118. So this is a pretty large buff. Currently with Spellslinger, my Frostbolts can hit upwards of like 900 to 1.1 million. So that getting buffed by a decent amount is good. That's with a lot of different modifiers though. So I'll show you guys the build here, the Frostbolt build with Spellslinger. So I'll go Frostbolt. You can see here we're basically just rocking Deep Shatter, Slick Ice, Death's Chill, and Frozen Touch. And then we'll be rocking Spellslinger so that we actually get access to Frostbolt. Now, I can't really show you on the dummies too much because the PvP modifiers are not enabled on the dummies. But essentially the way this build plays is it's the same thing except during your veins, you're basically just spamming Frostbolt instead. Because you're trying to buff this thing here, Slick Ice, so that the cast time is reduced and the damage is increased. And then once you're at 5 stacks and you cast your Frostbolts, they'll crit pretty hard. Now on players, this hits for upwards of like 1.1 million. On these dummies, they're hitting a little bit less just because of the modifier not actually being enabled in PvP. So you can see we actually hit a 1 million there, even on the dummy. Maybe the modifier isn't on the dummy now, but yeah, so you can see that's kind of how the build plays. It is a good amount of damage. It's just the problem is that it's all casted damage. So casted damage makes sense. You can see sort of how these changes are BG Blitz changes, right? Because this build will actually own in BG Blitz. So this is actually kind of a really big buff to Frost Mage in terms of BG Blitz. Now for arena side of things, this is not ideal because of how much you actually have to cast. And that is where the problem sort of comes in because, like I said, these changes are, when you look at them from a Blitz perspective, they make sense. But when you look at them from an arena perspective, this is not necessarily the best for Frost Mage because being able to cast at that level of Frostbolts, that amount, is not something that's it's not something that's an easy ask, right? Like how many Frostbolts did I have to actually cast there to do damage? And I cast 17. Casting 17 Frostbolts in PvP is almost not even, like during your veins window, I mean, is not even viable at all. So we'll have to see what we do if we stay with the instant cast build or the Frostbolt build. I'm not entirely sure yet. So I'm sorry that I don't have some like crazy takeaway for you guys. Now, we will be testing these live on this upcoming Tuesday when these patch notes hit. So make sure you tune in TTV/Aeghis. I'll be live, I don't know, somewhere around 4 p.m. Eastern or something like that. So tune in for that. We'll be testing the changes live. And then we have Ray of Frost damage increased by 5%. Now this is not including the 15% up here. Yeah, just keep that in mind, that this is basically the only thing that's happening to Ray is a 5% increase. I don't think that's enough to warrant taking it. Maybe it is, because with this new build, it's really difficult to go down and pick Ray, because you have to take a lot of these talents over here, like all these Frostbolt ones, Frozen Touch, Deep Shatter, Fractured Frost, Death's Chill. I'll have these builds in the description below, or sorry, in the comment section below. Now we get on to the last nerf to Frost Mage, and this one is a defensive nerf. So Ice Barrier absorb amount is now decreased by 40%, was 25. So all specs had a barrier nerf by 25%. Now as Frost, it's a further 15% less effective. So this is definitely not an awesome nerf. Like, barrier is definitely a big part of how you survive. More important, it's how you're trading blocks, how you're walling, and where you're positioning. Barrier in my eyes is more of like, you know, it is a nice as a shield, but I primarily use it as a way to remove my snares, so I can actually move around the map and avoid damage in the first place. But obviously just the absorb amount going down is not something we want to see, especially with the current meta and what's strong. Affliction Lock, Feral Druids, Hunters, BM Hunters, like all these classes that have sort of dots and passive damage. Yeah, your barrier is just gonna be a little bit less effective now, which definitely sucks. Like I said, guys, we'll have to check it out on Tuesday to see what's gonna be viable for Frost Mage. I'm gonna be testing out the instant cast build first, and then from there we'll try out the Frostbolt build, and then maybe we'll go into some Blitz and try Frostbolt build too. It's not the worst thing, it's not the best thing. I think Frost Mage will be fine. I don't think it's gonna be, it's going to be weaker for sure, but it will probably still be pretty good, just not as good as it is now. So we'll have to see what happens there. So now we have the final changes here, the Arcane changes. So let's start talking about those. Okay, so for Arcane, we have Arcane Blast damage increased by 45%, was 15. So that's a 30% buff to Arcane Blast. Again, not sure what the math comes out to that, because Arcane's base damage was increased by 15%, or sorry, it was at a 15% modifier, and now it's a 30% modifier. So it went up from 15 to 30. Or sorry, 45, so it doesn't actually equate quite literally to 30%. It's a little confusing, but Arcane Missiles increased by 20%, Arcane Barrage increased by 15%, but Magi Spark is now 50% effective in PvP. So Magi Spark, if you guys are not aware of what that is, if we talent into Arcane here, we can read Magi Spark. Your touch of the Magi now also conjures a spark, causing the damage from your next barrage, blast, and missiles to echo for 100% of their damage. Now that'll be 50% of their damage. This was how you primarily bursted on an Arcane Mage. So what you would do is, like, you would get all your modifiers, you'd get like 4 combo points, you'd surge, right? And then this is one way you could do it. You would barrage and then Magi while it's in the air, right? And then boom, your 500k barrage would echo. Then your first missiles tick would echo all the ticks. Then your blast would hit twice, right? That's going to be nerfed in half. So if you hit a 700k blast, your first blast into your Magi hits 700k. Instead of echoing 700k, it'll echo like 350k. So that's a big burst nerf on your Magi. But the reason I don't mind these changes here is because this is a nice direction for Arcane Mage. Will it be enough of a compensation on the Spark nerf to actually come out to be a net buff? That I'm not 100% sure of until further testing, because you see all these big numbers, but then you're like, okay, Magi Spark, which was your main kill window, is now half effective. So the chunk damage of Arcane goes down, but the consistent damage of Arcane goes way up. This is something that I've been wanting for Arcane for quite a long time, because I've always referred to Arcane as a Magi based spec, as it is right now, because during that Magi, you would have huge one-shot damage, right? Your burst damage during this window was pretty much the only time that you were useful. And now, hopefully, you know, with these changes, instead of being just like, you know, a crazy amount of damage during your Magi and your surge, maybe now it'll be a little bit more balanced out in terms of like your Magi is a little bit weaker, but you're sitting here and your casting damage with no cooldowns will be a bit higher, right? Like when I'm just hitting these dummies here with no cooldowns up, it's nothing crazy, right? It's not a crazy amount of damage. And then now with these buffs, hopefully it's like way more. I'm hoping that's the case. I really like when Arcane just does a lot of baseline damage like this. It was one of the most fun variations of Arcane that I enjoyed was in Dragonflight season 1 or 2, I believe, I'm not exactly sure. And it's when Blast's baseline damage was really high. I'm excited that Blast got a huge buff. I'm excited that the rest of these got a big buff, and I don't really mind the burst window of the Magi going down. I do think that this will be a positive change for Arcane overall, and I'm excited to see what happens here. I don't think we'll actually change up the build. I don't think that these buffs and nerfs actually warrant any build change, which is nice. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Again, we'll be testing all these changes throughout the week. Twitch name is Aeghis, Aeghis. I'm live every single day except for Sundays, so come check me out on there. Hope you guys enjoyed the video of the breakdown, and stay positive out there, mages. I think we'll be all right. But yeah, anyways, peace out, guys. Peace.